Well, this is pretty damning. You have the former editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics during its most successful, or one of its most successful financial eras, Jim Shooter, throwing shade at Spider-Man One More Day and editor-in-chief Joe Quesada, saying that Marvel doesn't understand the character of Spider-Man. So that's pretty wild to read. It does track, if you knew Jim Shooter, talked to Jim Shooter. I had a chance to talk to Jim Shooter at length at a convention a couple months before he passed, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. But he cared very, very deeply about these characters. He did. Jim Shooter worked at Marvel most of his life. I mean, he started at like 15 years old working in comics, and he was a guy who, ate, slept, and breathes comic books. And these Marvel characters were near and dear to him. And, so for him to come out and say, you fundamentally do not understand Spider-Man, Marvel, is pretty wild. And again, it totally tracks. So we're going to talk about this. This has been dug up again by, let's give a hat tip to the Corporal here. And I'm sure this quote's, it sounds vaguely familiar. I'm sure it's been around, made its rounds on social media before, but it's coming from a 2011 blog. It's not actually in the blog. It's coming from the comments section. And this is in response to One More Day. And you really have to dig to find what he was saying. But he basically was like, yeah, you don't understand Spider-Man. And I think a lot of comic book fans can point to that particular moment in time, One More Day, as the beginning of the end for Marvel Comics. So we'll talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. So it's hard to tell exactly how Marvel's doing right now or how DC's doing. We don't have sales numbers anymore. And I think this is the fog of war that the comic book industry is using to bullshit investors. This is my personal opinion, right? But I'm looking at this like, we've got people out there saying comics have never been better. They've had their best direct market year ever, all this crazy shit. And it can't be verified, right? So you can just say anything. And there is definitely a fog of war going on because I think there's going to be an existential crisis here if we're already not in the middle of it with the comic book industry, because we've got the corporate owners shifting gears. We've got Disney that's owned Marvel for 12, 15 years now. And they always historically have licensed their comics out. They don't do anything in-house, really. So I'm waiting for that other shoe to drop. And we've kind of seen them by degrees kind of, move in that direction. Marvel's no longer at 387 Park Avenue South. I think they're sharing a building with Disney Worldwide Publishing. And eventually, I think it will get to a place where it's not worth it for Disney and or Warner Brothers to publish paper comics anymore, at least not monthly comics, and just to outsource it to somebody who wants to be in that business. So that's Marvel, though, is getting their ass kicked. That's the only thing that's really clear from looking at the charts, looking at the numbers, is that Marvel is completely getting its ass kicked by DC at this point. And absolute for sure. I mean, again, I don't know the actual numbers. I do know it sells well, but that's relative. But if you look at the top 50 comic books by units for 2025. Yeah, Marvel's number one, but what is it? Deadpool, Batman. So people are buying it for Batman and Deadpool, but mostly for Batman, because Batman is basically carrying the entire comic book industry at this point. Look at this. The first 25 books, you have to get to, let's see, how far down do we got to go here on this list? Number 22, Ultimate Wolverine number 1. It's number 1 book. And then we get down to number 25 is Amazing Spider-Man number 1 again, which I got to tell you, this is one of the things that really turns me off as a longtime reader and turns off a lot of people, I think, that have not gotten into the hobby, is the legacy numbering and, a new number 1 every other year. It's so freaking stupid. It's so stupid. I mean, they're clearly just making these for the trades at this point. Now, I don't know how the trades are doing, but it's like, look, at most you get like 24 issues before they decide to pull the plug and reboot. It's so stupid, and this can't last, right? But Spider-Man was always Marvel's flagship comic. It was, when I was reading comics heavily, it was Spider-Man and the X-Men carried Marvel. And both of those books are not doing well right now. Actually, it was weird when I was reading, the Avengers were also rans. Like, they weren't the top sellers. I don't even think the Avengers were in the top, because it was the reason that Disney had the Avengers. Little bit of history here is that all the other IP that Marvel thought was worth more, they'd already cut movie deals for back in the 80s and 90s. And believe it or not, Fantastic Four was one of those properties. Fantastic Four was actually very popular under John Byrne. I loved it. I know people are like, well, Fantastic Four have always been lame. No, actually, they were pretty cool. At least, I was kind of a geeky kid, but I loved the Fantastic Four when I was a kid. The books I did not read from Marvel, I always read Fantastic Four. I always read X-Men. I always read Spider-Man. Occasionally Punisher, occasionally Daredevil. But for my taste at that point in time, they were a little on the grimdark side. I wasn't really into like grimdark comics. I did not read the Avengers very often. I picked up like crossover events with Spider-Man. I did read West Coast Avengers for a while because I like that better than the actual Avengers. But like, the Avengers were fucking lame. Nobody cared about the Avengers. Nobody cared about the Avengers. Nobody knew who half the Avengers were. Disney turned the Avengers into a thing. Well, not Disney. Paramount turned the Avengers into a thing with the MCU, with Iron Man, because that's all that was left. I mean, Iron Man was like a B-list, C-list hero. The Avengers were bigger, I think, in the like 60s and 70s, but when I was reading in the 80s and 90s, they were lame as hell. Nobody was reading them. They're basically, the Avengers were at where the X-Men are at right now. Where like everybody's aware of them, but everybody kind of groans about how bad the books are. But what was carrying Marvel for the longest time was Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, Punisher, all those things. And those books are all dog shit now, and nobody's buying them, and clearly DC's winning. So what does this have to do with Jim Shooter? Well, things were better under Jim Shooter, and I'm sorry, you can try to argue that one, but no. It's you don't have to like Jim Shooter. I know a lot of people don't like Jim Shooter. A lot of people who worked in the comic book industry didn't like him because he was a tough nut, but he ran Marvel Comics like a business. He ran it like any other editor at any other magazine publishing company or newspaper. And I think he deserves respect for that. He brought order to chaos. He Secret Wars was a massive hit for him. The X-Men blew up under his eye. All these things happened. The golden era of Marvel for me was definitely the 80s and early 90s up until I'd say like 92, 91. Actually, I think that some of the early Marvel stuff really jumped the shark. But we had about 15 years, I would say late 70s through early 90s. It was amazing. And a lot of those years were under the watch of Jim Shooter. So he deserves that respect. Anyway, this is what he said. This was 2011. It was actually in a blog post. It was 3 comic book weddings and holy matrimony. And his blog is a gold mine, guys. If you haven't gone out to his blog, check it out. This is one post, and he's like posting an entire script. He's telling people where they got the idea for certain characters from, and the fashion, and all these things, and all the thought processes that went on in their heads when they were coming up with these comics. And somebody asked him, this is Scott, he said, Jim, when Marvel did the One More Day story and erased the Spider-Man marriage, I dropped the title and specifically chose to replace it on my pull list with the DC book, just as Legions of Superheroes number 37 came out. I picked up your run and liked it well enough. I thought it was good fun, standalone title, and you'd given a good mix of action, story progression, melodrama. Okay, I'm sorry it was so frustrating for you. I dropped the book when you quit. Cheers, Scott. Okay, this is his response. Thanks, Scott. I wish my Legions of Superhero run had been all it could have been. I wish I was smarter, better, more talented. I wish everyone had done his or her job better, but so it goes. He doesn't pull any punches. He didn't pull any punches. And that's why people didn't like him, because he didn't handle creatives with kid gloves. He didn't. And he's even criticizing himself. Okay, here's where it's really interesting, though. I finally got around to reading One More Day and a Brand New Day. And though I admired the skill of the creators, I didn't recognize any of the characters. Open note to Joe Quesada and the Marvel creative staff. If you don't understand who the characters in your care are, call me and I'll clue you in. Yes, that's a snarky comment. Yes, I'm that appalled by the thing. Damn. I mean, that is damn. That's brutal. And the thing is that I don't think the MCU is headed in a very good direction. We've known this for a while, but everybody's like, oh, cool. They're going to, kind of fix Spider-Man. They're going to revert Peter Parker back to being a street level hero, making his own costume and whatever, and being his own man. I'm like, I don't know. Cause well, one, they're calling the next Spider-Man movie Brand New Day. I don't know how much they're pulling from actual Brand New Day, or if it's just because, the entire world's forgotten who Peter Parker is at this point, which is very much, like what happened in the comics, except under different circumstances. But also it looks like it's going to be an ensemble movie because we've got the Punisher, the Hulk, and Daredevil showing up too, which is like, okay, so is Peter Parker ever going to be allowed to be his own man in the MCU? Probably not. But I think it was a very bad idea for Marvel to say, hey, we're going to turn over a new leaf with Spider-Man, and he's not going to be Iron Man Jr. And first thing we're going to do is name it after one of the most controversial stories in recent comic book history. And I think you can really point back to One More Day, Brand New Day as the beginning of the end of Marvel. I mean, I've got my own headcanon, and I think anything after like 2010, 2012 is pretty much apocryphal because they just kept rebooting things and the timelines weren't meshing up. And it was, and I don't know, nothing matters now. I mean, that's the thing that bothers me about modern comics too, is that nothing matters because they're going to reboot it. They're going to ignore certain storylines. When I read Marvel religiously for, months, years, and there was always a sliding timeline. It was always like 8 years from today. 8 years ago from today is when the Marvel universe started. So they would move it up a little bit. Like, okay, the Fantastic Four got together in the 70s, not the 60s, you know what I'm saying? And then John Byrne did the reboot of Spider-Man 2 and tried to modernize his origin. But like, there's no continuity whatsoever. It's just all bullshit. Right? I know it's all make-believe. I get it's all pretend, but it's like, it has a huge reason, I think, why a lot of people are noping out. Because you're basically just getting trade paperbacks and movie pitches, and there's no stakes. There's no like real, like actual Marvel universe. Because I don't think a lot of the people working at Marvel care enough about the characters as comic book characters. I think they look at them as IP, just like Disney does. And they're like, okay, well, we can do this storyline and maybe that'll get picked up as a movie. And it does work. I mean, you look at, what James Gunn's doing. He's actually picking from the newer DC comics. And those are storylines. It's so weird to me when people are like, oh, we're going to finally get a chance to make a movie about this character. And it's, from a comic story like 2 years ago, 5 years ago or whatever, and I'm like, you've got decades of really good stuff you could be strip mining here. And you're giving us like the new shit. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? But, there it is. I just thought it was really interesting. It's Sunday. It's kind of slow. But to hear Jim Shooter call out Joe Quesada and say you fundamentally do not understand Spider-Man is gold. It's gold. So I'm going to wrap it up. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.